I'm the polar opposite of Piyush Pandey because I didn't know any Hindi at all at that time, and even now my Hindi is not perfect. Like they say, kill all your little darlings. He said, cut out every word, every adjective, any word that you can cut out and still be able to convey the same meaning. And that I think that this one lesson is the most important lesson that I ever learned about the craft of writing. Yeah. So I think when you're a copywriter, you're thinking, okay, what is a cool creative idea, a campaign concept which is going to answer the brief. Whereas I think when you're a creative director, you're thinking, okay, I have to change behavior. Okay, let me do something where I am my own client. So that was one of the things that prompted me to do the English Nut as well. And, but I think resilience is one of the most important things for a copywriter, for any creative person to have. So I think this has taught us a different level of resilience.
Namaskaram.
Namaskaram.
Okay, so I'm going to start from the past, come to the present, and head into the future.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about your past.
So yeah, I am from I would say Calcutta, now Kolkata. We'd been there for at least 7 generations. We were squarely Calcuttans, in that sense. So that's where it began. But when I was very young, when I was around 5 or 6 years old, my family moved to England, and I went to school in England. And I remember we were put around these tables with like some 6 kids, and I remember just staring blankly because I couldn't join in the conversation. I remember it as 2 weeks, maybe it was slightly longer, but I just started talking, in English. And I think in correct English at that time. And I never stopped speaking because my family would always tell me, shut up, So, but I think that's the beauty of that age, is that you can just absorb a language and be able to function in it, instinctively. It's not like taking grammar lessons and having to learn. So that was really like a fantastic experience for me because it opened up new vistas for me. Of course, I became like a serial professional student because I didn't want to start working. I went to a college in Kentucky, USA called Berea College, which was a work study program, which means that if you got into it, your what they call tuition over there is like taken care of, but you have to work like 15 to 20 hours a week on campus. And it was a wonderful historic college, which was very much a part of the civil rights movement in the US. And it was a very forward-looking college because it actually uh, sort of encouraged desegregated education in the days when it was almost illegal. And that's what one of the reasons that the Civil War happened in America. And the college sort of became like a fortified campus at that time, I believe. And there was a hotel owned by the college called the Boone Tavern, where I worked as a waiter. That was my first job. I learned to carry like trays. So it was an amazing learning experience because we talk about the dignity of labor. So one of the things that this college was really big on was to say that every job is important and is to be respected. It's not like there's a lesser job. So after this, like I said, I was a professional student. When I was nearing graduation, I was in a crisis because I don't want to work. I don't know what I want to do because I had no idea what I would want to do as in my professional life. And then these recruiters would come from other universities, and so there was a applied mathematics program in Clemson University, South Carolina, and they came and they offered me a a space in their master's program. So I said yes, because I had no idea what else I wanted to do. So I ended up doing a master's in applied mathematics, where my job was actually teaching statistics and probability to undergraduate students. And that's a whole other, that was one of those life-changing experiences for me, which we might as well talk about that now. So, all the American universities have these sports programs, right? So you see these hulking football players and baseball players who are your students. They're like, 6 foot 6 inches tall. They're like this, and they tower over you. When I had to teach this class in probability, first of all, I was really nervous about it because I had never taught up till that point in my life. So, I mean, that was the main thing. I never taught. So I was like, how am I going to do this? I was nervous to get up in front of a group of people. At that time, I mean, the thought of it like gave me shivers. But here I was, I found myself, and then, I would have my notes and I would write them on the blackboard. And, I couldn't write properly on the back because my writing would go up and down. And what was really bad was that the students started heckling me, like the minute I would turn my back, all those stories, chalks being thrown and like giggling and laughing. And, basically it was a racket. And what I realized after like a week or two was that there was this one guy who was a football player. He was literally bullying me, and all the other students ganged up with him against me. So after spending like a few weeks of sleepless nights, I decided that I've got to talk to the guy. I didn't know what I was going to say to him, but I had to talk to him. And you won't, normally you think that a student would have to summon up courage to talk to a teacher, but I had to summon up a lot of courage one day uh, just as class was getting over, to tell him, I'd like you to stay back after class. I wanted to talk to you about something. And so he stayed back, and I told him that, this is the first time that I'm doing this job. I find it really hard. I'm struggling, and you're not making it any easier for me. If you continue doing what you're doing, I won't be able to teach this class at all. And that was like a miraculous moment, because you won't believe it. This, from the next class onwards, not only did this guy stop doing his heckling, go on the best behavior, but he controlled the rest of the class for me. He became like the de facto unofficial class monitor. So if anybody was unruly, he would make that person, behave, and then he would look at me like, see, and he became like my best friend. So that was really like the power of communication for me. I won't bore you any further, but when I finished my master's degree in mathematics, I still didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I didn't want to work. So I got enrolled in an MBA program at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. And I did a 2-year MBA in marketing. So I think that I found it dreadfully boring. The one thing that I used to enjoy there were the advertising. You had to take advertising 101, and the teacher would show these reels of TV commercials, and I would say, this looks like a fun thing to do. So that was the only bright spot in the entire MBA program. There was a competition from the French tourism board, I think, to write a slogan for France. I got to know that I've been invited on Bastille Day by the French government, because they chose one French and one English slogan from wherever, McGill University, and I won the one for English. So maybe that was like an early sign for me. And I still remember the first group project that I had, and with a bunch of these typical white Canadians, and I said, I'm going to write it, and they looked at me like, you bloody brown third world person, like, you think you can write? I mean, they didn't say that, but they were like, no, we'll all write it. And so I think that, I said, okay, let me start. And then, they would start bringing in the research, and I started writing it, and then they realized that, yes, I could write. So after that, that became like my designated job in all the group projects. So yeah, so I think I always had a love for writing. And even before that, during my undergraduate day, in all the colleges there have these college papers, and I started writing for the columns for the college paper. So that was actually the first time that I started uh, writing. Yeah. So yeah, so that's really been my education. And then so when I came back to Kolkata after this, almost a permanent professional student status, I thought that maybe I should try my hand at advertising. So at that time in Kolkata, there was a agency. There still is an agency called Response. It was run by Mr. Ram Ray, who was a legend of advertising. He himself, though he was in that sense a client servicing guy, he was, in fact, a lot of my grounding in writing has come from him, because he was a stickler for good writing, and in both English and Bengali. And he had his own take on how to write, and he was an extraordinary character. And like the basics, when I would write copy and take it to him, so his first thing he told me was, cut out every word that you can, you know without losing meaning. Like they say, kill all your little darlings. He said, cut out every word, every adjective, any word that you can cut out and still be able to convey the same meaning. And that, I think that this one lesson is the most important lesson that I ever learned about the craft of writing. Yeah.
So tell me, when you got your first job, was it very different from how people get their first jobs today?
So I approached Mr. Ram Ray. I just showed up at uh, his office, and of course, I was armed with an American or a Canadian MBA, which even today, I think ad agencies struggle to get MBAs, right, for their client servicing department. So of course he was like, yes, please, I'd like you to join my client servicing department. And I said, no, I think I'd like to join creative. So he said, oh, okay. But anyway, so as part of the application process, I had to write an essay. So I think that it was that essay that really kind of got me the job in that sense.
So in your advertising career, is there any one particular moment or episode that stands out as a turning point?
So after Response, I joined Ogilvy in
Kolkata. Straight
in Calcutta. Yeah, from Response Calcutta to Ogilvy Calcutta. And when I joined Ogilvy, so this was my thinking at that time. I realized that if I really wanted to grow in this profession, I would have to move to Mumbai, because Kolkata, unfortunately, industry stagnated in that city a long time ago, and there's not even today, it's limited in terms of what kind of opportunities are there, particularly in advertising. So I said that let me move, but I thought that working in a really small agency in Calcutta straight away to join a network agency in Bombay would be like too huge a jump for me. So I thought it might not be a bad thing if I joined an advertising agency, a network agency in Calcutta, and then moved with them to Bombay. So I applied to O&M in Calcutta, and so it was actually the branch. There wasn't a creative head in the Calcutta office at that time, and actually it was one of the client servicing heads, and then the branch head who interviewed me, and then they said that so I actually got the job basis those interviews. And after I had joined, and that was the time when it was the early heydays of Piyush Pandey. And then I was told one day that he's coming for a shoot to Calcutta. So bring your portfolio with you, so show it to him. And so I brought my portfolio and I showed it to him, and I had actually already been hired, but he went through it, and I think that my work was not very good, but he just kind of said, good. And also, one of the things is that everybody comments as, I'm the polar opposite of Piyush Pandey, because, I didn't know any Hindi at all at that time. And even now, my Hindi is not perfect, really, far from.
Moving to the present, how's 2020 been for you?
Well, it's been pretty shitty. It's been really tough, I would say, really, really tough. Business just took a nosedive, and we just work like crazy round the clock. And I'd wake up at 4 in the morning and think, what's going to happen, because yesterday one more client has said that we are discontinuing our contract or reducing our fees. So of course, the last couple of months things have looked up because business has restarted, and there was a time when we were hardly shooting any. And for me, as basically a creative guy, the barometer is how many shoots are we doing. So
Yeah.
even if you're doing them for like sort of at 1/4 or 1/5 of the price at which you would have done it during normal times, but you're still doing a shoot. And also, I was thinking that how the hell are we going to get back to shooting, because I was quite realistic about the fact that this pandemic is not going away as quickly as a lot of people thought in the beginning of lockdown. So but then a couple of months ago I realized that we could supervise shoots on Zoom calls, and we found ways and means. In fact, there were times when there was one day in particular, two shoots on two different brands got scheduled on the same day, and one was in Bangalore and one was in Mumbai, and I could supervise both of them, one on my phone and the other on my laptop on Zoom. So that's something that I could never have thought of doing in the old normal.
You can literally be at two places at the same time.
Personally, for me, working from home seems to have worked well. I've taken to it very well. So I think that being able to do a video call meeting with a client in another city is just great. And I think that is the way that we should work even when things are back to normal. I'm not saying 100% of the time. It should be like a mixed thing. But what I do find that there are a lot of companies who are just, they don't want to do it. I mean, I have clients who are already working, out of offices, though we are not. And they're like, it's just not, we can't work from home. And for me, I mean, I would like to think that this should be at least, yes, there are certain things maybe where you need to gather as a group and work and be face to face, but most of it can be done face to face virtually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we can supervise shoots, I mean, we've done shoots, we managed to pull off films in the last couple of months where we had outdoor shoots. One film was shot in Gangtok, Calcutta, Jaipur, and Mumbai. The director was directing from home. The chief cameraman was sort of directing the on ground sort of camera operator from home, and it was just a skeleton crew and the actors, in the different places, and and we pulled off a really nice film. I'm not saying that we can do every project like that, but there is so much more that you can do, without sort of increasing your carbon footprint. I think we're all comfortable with the status quo till something forces us to change, and this was a jolt for all of us. And I remember when lockdown hit, the first thing that I worked on was I created something called the COVID-19 commandments for 82.5 communication. In the early part of lockdown, it was all about our prime minister, sort of coming up with initiatives like clanging your buttons or, things like that. And so I think there was a lot of moment marketing going on with certain categories which were thriving, such as the hygiene category. We all knew basis what happened in China before, that hygiene category actually explodes because there's an awareness of hygiene that comes in, and a fear psychosis almost, where you just want to clean everything. Our client in our Bangalore office is Himalaya, and we launched a hand wash for Himalaya called Pure Hands, and I worked on a campaign for that in the early part of the lockdown, which I'm really proud of, because I think at that point, the biggest thrill was if you could execute a film which didn't look like it was made in lockdown.
Made it from, yeah.
So, and our concept for this was it was a very simple concept, and the concept was for Pure Hands was Namaste is the hashtag purest greeting.
Namaste. A greeting so pure, it signifies that the divine in me bows to the divine in you. Namaste. A greeting so pure, it's from one soul to another. Namaste. A greeting from our ancient past to our future. Namaste. India's greeting to the world. Namaste. It only spreads love. Himalaya Pure Hands.
We went to Bob. If he likes an idea, he becomes really passionate about it, and he works through all the obstacles. And what we did was we said, let's do it. Let's shoot. It has to be shot from home, in the house, because at that time it was the strictest part of lockdown. So what he did was he got in touch with DOPs across India and even internationally to shoot their family members, or somebody who's in their house, in their home, or in their building compound. And there were a few places where there were sort of outdoor locations where you could shoot. And also internationally, though our film obviously was about Namaste being India's uh, contribution to the world. That was the thought. So in the later part of the film, you have foreigners doing the Namaste, and some of them were in countries where, and first of all, over there, a lot of people live out in the open country where you can walk out of your house. And so, so there were these people who were shot in these beautiful locations doing the Namaste, because, that was, what the greeting that goes out from India to the world. And this film came out beautifully, and it sort of really, I know it's a cliche, but it went viral. So that was one of the things that we worked on. Another thing that we worked on early on was we worked on a campaign uh, for domestic abuse awareness, because in the lockdown, domestic abuse skyrocketed, because it's a terrible situation where the victim is under lockdown with, that it's your closest family members and relatives who are most often your abusers in a domestic abuse situation.
Yeah.
And you are locked indoors 24 hours. You cannot even make a call privately to somebody to ask for help. So of course we had to do it under strict lockdown. So it was done out of our Bangalore office, and all the photographers were like, even our branch manager photographed somebody in his family. Everybody photographed somebody in their family, or got somebody in their family who can take decent pictures to photograph themselves, and all the signs of domestic. And it was about, at that time, the mask was the big larger than life device. So we talked about the fact that the mask protects you against COVID, but not against domestic abuse. Which sounds like a cliche now. At that time, it was a very big deal. And so all the photoshopping, the makeup, and then photoshopping to create those bruises and cuts and all that, everything had to be done out of home, and it came out so well, just in terms of finish. So these were the two. One sort of a static campaign for social media, and the other one a proper TV campaign, which we were able to execute to perfection, right in the beginning of lockdown, which gave us, it was a big learning, and it gave us a lot of confidence also, that it is possible to make things
Like
work.
a lot of the kids that I speak to, they are dealing with a whole bunch of other problems mainly in their head, and some of them have like finding it difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I mean, I know that young people, either because they were staying alone and they couldn't handle the isolation, or I know other colleagues who stay with their families and they couldn't get, like,
Handle the family.
have a place where they could work in peace and quiet. So so those things did affect a lot of people. It's not, it's not always easy. But I think resilience is, one of the most important things for a copywriter, for any creative person to have. So I think this has taught us a different level of resilience.
What is the difference between being a copywriter and being a creative director? Of course, I understand the creative director also got a lot to do with the business aspect.
So I think that's difficult and an easy question to answer. Like you said, there's one key aspect of it is to get a deeper and deeper understanding of every aspect of advertising. When you're a copywriter, you're just thinking ideas, thinking of how to write them. But I think that as you become a creative director, you have to be able to, of course, I mean, the most basic step is you also have to understand the art, copy art aspect, execution. To me, being a creative director meant that, first of all, to know what is the potential of a script, for example, and then to be able to get that, like a really great film out of that, be able to supervise a shoot and make sure that everything comes out. And I still find that today with a lot of creative directors, they're not able to do that somehow. I mean, the fact that, the interventions that you have to make, it could be just one intervention in an entire shoot, but you have to be looking at every bit of it with a hawk eye to know what, where something, okay, if I don't have this shot like this, I may have a problem later on.
So would you say that the copywriter's job would be more in the free realm, think what you want to do, and the creative
Yes.
director's job would be to actually,
Yeah.
snip it down and say, boss, possible, impossible, possible, not possible, gray area.
I think when you're a copywriter, you're thinking, okay, what is a cool creative idea, a campaign concept which is going to answer the brief. Whereas I think when you're a creative director, you're thinking, okay, I have to change behavior. I have to make people want to want, of course, to buy this product or to do things in a certain way. So it's absolutely fine for the copywriter to only think in those terms. But as a creative director, you have to think about what is the insight that is going to, and how is it expressed in a way that is going to compel people to, actually sit up and take notice and do something differently in their life from what they were doing before, or to buy something which they would not have otherwise thought of buying, or use something they would not have thought of using. Being a creative director is the way you work with your team, the ability to get great work out of your team, to have a cohesive team. All of those things are a key part of your job. And I know a lot of creative directors, they're brilliant creative people. They, as an individual, as a person, they'll come up with this brilliant campaign, overnight. Uh, but I don't think that they're being able to nudge and lead and coax their people into working in the right way and producing that work, which is not a very happy situation for those juniors.
If I want to grow up to become a creative director, I think one of the things that you're saying is that do you believe that we have to expand our area of interest as well? In terms of, like, today I can write and I love copy and I love, but if I want to grow into a larger role, I must understand filmmaking, I must understand art and the nuances of that. I must understand even music. I must understand every aspect, not just one creative. So a creative director for me is a guy who understands many different creative industries, really.
Yeah, true.
But may not be able to actually execute or produce it,
Yeah.
but knows how to, find what. So do you think that is something that is that most young creative people should actually, those who want to get into a bigger, wider zone, should start concentrating on as well?
Yeah, to get it right, I mean, of course, you've got a director, but I'm saying that if you have a great director, that person will take your script, and without you having to really push them, they'll be able to, use music in a fantastic way, use the right kind of music, and all of those things, the elements that you're talking about. But, when you're not working with such a great director, you have to have a very clear vision in your head of what the final product has to be. And to have that clear vision, for example, if you don't appreciate music at all, if you have no understanding of music, you don't have to have a professional, let's say, you don't have to be a student in that sense of music. For example, it's not like I understand, I can talk technically about music, but I can at least talk about it enough to be able to convey to the director and to the music director as to what I believe is required. And then when you listen to that track, sometimes you say, sorry, this just isn't working.
Working with Piyush, both of you, like you said, completely different schools of advertising or creativity, but you used to work under the same roof and create.
Yeah.
Like, how was that? How did that work? And also, if you have some nice, interesting stories to tell about of those good old days of Ogilvy.
So yeah, so when I came to Bombay, and Piyush would speak. I'm not exaggerating. I used to have nightmares where Piyush is speaking to me in Hindi, and I'm not understanding what he's saying to me. So I think we were poles apart in every way, and so it wasn't like smooth sailing between us. I mean, I can tell you honestly, but I think that with Piyush, and beyond the point also, he kind of leaves you alone, and if you're not his type of person. But I think that you just being in the same agency of which he's the creative head, you learn a tremendous amount, and especially in today, doing learning, being able to do scripts and being able to create great TV commercials or digital videos. There are lots of people and lots of agencies who can do that. At that point in time, that was not. There were very few copywriters who understood the film medium, and that is, I think, that the biggest thing that I've learned being in, under Piyush, is that because he had set such a high standard, and this whole that again coming back to that point of when you're supervising a shoot, how critical it is to be able to get those things out, and what is the role that music can play. And I remember there would be ads which didn't come out so well, and Piyush said, let's put a song to this, and he would write a song, and then he would say, talk to the music director and say, do this kind of music, and it would come out, that same thing would go from average to very good.
Your favorite work? It could be your own. Firstly, I would like to know your favorite work that you have done.
So, there's one piece of work, it's very old, but it was, I won a Cannes award on it. And that was like, I mean, obviously for a copywriter, that is like a different high. So it was a campaign that I did for adoption. And I think that, again, in those days in India, adoption, I think the openness there is, I think, a far greater. The people didn't even talk about it at that time. So the challenge was to create something which would, not like sort of use a shock tactic or something like that, but to use something which made people look at adoption in a far more beautiful way. So and this is like, it's a print. I mean, I did a print campaign. So of course I did this with Rajiv Rao, because I mean, again, we're talking about execution. So of course Rajiv Rao was the finest, crafts person as an art director that Ogilvy had. So, and the line says, adopt, you will receive more than you can ever give. Because I think the sort of the assumption was that you're adopting because you can, you will change the life of this unfortunate child. But the fact that there is what you get, that the affection and love that you get in return, I think enriches you far more than what you're giving to that person. And that's visual twist was used to convey that. So this is a ad I did for Bengal tourism, and as an English copywriter, there are not too many baselines that I get to say I wrote that, because most of the brands have Hindi baseline. So I can, as a creative director, I can have credit on it, and I may have had played a role in that happening, but it's not something I wrote myself. But when we pitched for Bengal tourism, we pitched on this slogan, Bengal, the sweetest part of India. And that's what won us the pitch. And it was a few years ago, and they continue to use that. And I just felt, and as a Bengali, it was really a proud moment for me to do something, really from the heart, because it's from something that I believed in, and it was a culture that I grew up in and that I was steeped in, and I was able to bring a lot of that, I was able to put a Tagore song into an ad, which I'd never been able to do before. Show a lot of the cultural nuances and icons of the state, which meant a lot to me, but which I'd never been able to use in an ad. And I worked with Prakash Verma, who's, I mean, I think he's a wizard at creating imagery. So, so there's a twist at the end, which was a twist for us also. But I'll tell you after the video. But it was not originally part of the film. But nevertheless, let me.
আমি চিনি গো চিনি তোমারে ও গো বিদেশিনী
Welcome to Bengal, the sweetest part of India.
The song in this film is a Tagore song, which is the words are Ogo Bideshini, which means dear Videshini is like a foreign lady, right? And it's actually like addressing this foreign woman and saying wonderful things about her. So the whole thing it was like the state of Bengal serenading this foreign tourist. That was the thought behind it. And there are a lot of little things, like those honey collectors in the Sundarbans, they wear a mask on the back of their head. I don't know if you know why, but because it's believed
to protect them from the tigers, right? So the tigers think that they're looking at them.
Yeah, there's a belief that tigers don't attack somebody who's looking
from
at
the
them.
front.
So they normally attack from the back. But if you've got, I mean, I don't know. It's partly, I think, a myth. But anyway, so I mean, there's just a lot of things like that which are there in the film. Which the bauls, who are these the sort of Sufi sort of folk musicians, they're sort of spiritual people who go around, they sing and they smoke pot and all that. So there was a group of them also, and we went and shot like this, went to this ashram somewhere and shot this very, very famous baul, who has these Japanese followers who also.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so for me this was a fantastic opportunity to, first of all, to travel around the entire state and to be able to put something of myself, this culture, this musical heritage with which I grew up, which is Rabindranath Sangeet. And so I don't get to do it more in most of the ads, because you first of all rarely make an ad which is Bengal specific. So that's why that's why this is an ad which is really close to my heart for me. Sometimes you go through these really bad phases where, nothing is going right at work, and that, like people think, oh, when you reach a senior level, that I think it just gets a lot harder the more senior you are, because you're responsible for so many more things. So, like, okay, you're not being able to, win your pitches, and you're not being able to sell great campaigns to the client. So I said, okay, let me do something where I am my own client. So that was one of the things that prompted me to do the English Nut as well. And that is, became this thing. And I promised myself that at least for 1 year, every Sunday, I will come out with a video come hell or high water. And I was really proud
Nice,
that
nice.
I was able to do that. And now it's getting closer to 2. And it's been a slow growth because honestly, like, I thought in the beginning, I'm going to put out this great content and my, numbers, I'll have so many 100,000 views. But honestly, it wasn't like that. It was really, really slow and really, really tough. And I don't even know why things took. So my YouTube channel has finally started taking off a few months ago. And I don't know why it took so long to get to that point. Like, I actually consulted professionals who said, you've done everything right, so we don't know why it's not taking off. Whenever I do a video on a subject, I have to go back and research it as well, to come up with the right examples and to be sure I double check that everything that I'm saying is right. So
Nice.
I remember, I did this one video on redundancies where, the whole thing was examples of where we say things where we use additional words which are not required. So, for example, 12 p.m. midnight, 12
Yeah.
a.m. midnight, or 12 p.m. noon or something like that. And there are many, many examples. Uh, so, in that video, by mistake, at one point, I said, don't say this, say this instead, because it's exactly the same. Now, the word exactly was superfluous. And the number of people who in comments have pointed out, oh, at, so and so, this many minutes and this many seconds, you said exactly the same. So
But
I have to be really careful. I was just reading this article in the Guardian, UK, and they wrote this piece about, uh, should it be COVID with all caps or not? And they write it, they, according to the conventions of the newspaper, they write it capital C and then the rest in lowercase, followed by -19. And they had readers writing in saying, how could you do this? And there were others whose point of view was, at a time like this, how can you worry about something like all caps or not? But that's that. So they're saying that, but and they said our staff was working from home, but we patiently had to reply to all these hundreds of letters. Not just this one. This was one of the letters that come in every week, and we reply to them. Any spelling mistake, slight grammatical mistake, there are readers out there who are deeply troubled by it, and then they write to you and say, it's almost like the end of the world for them. That how can a hallowed newspaper like the Guardian make a mistake like this?
So when you're judging a portfolio, if you're looking at a young portfolio, what are the things that you look for? One, in a copywriter's portfolio, and what is something that is that's a faux pas, which is an unacceptable addition to a copywriter's portfolio, like something that comes and you say, okay, this guy can't be part of my team.
So I think that, especially when you're looking at junior levels, I think that the most, in some ways, difficult thing to do for copywriters is to understand, like as I was saying earlier, the film medium well, and to write compelling stories, scripts which are, great stories. And I most young copywriters will have portfolios which have some print ads in them, which is great. And of course, I look at the crafting in those ads, but I would say that, even like, it's also a reality that maybe in your current job, you don't have an opportunity to make a film, but then what you do is that you write scripts. At least you do whatever, something to convey to me that, if I give you a brief to write a film for a brand, you'll be able to write on brand, you'll be able to write on strategy. And even more important than all of those things for a young copywriter is that you know how to tell a story in a 30-second format or a 1-minute format or whatever it is. So I think that's the number one thing I look for. The other thing that I look for is variety, that, it shouldn't all be like the same kind of work. Or even if I'm specifically looking at say scripts for TV commercials or digital videos or whatever. Some people really thrive on doing montage. Some people thrive on doing a single situation story. I think it's always harder to do a single situation kind of thing. So again, if it comes down to the crunch, that's what I look for, that somebody can tell a story about us, which is one situation in somebody's life. So that's what I look at. uh, no, of course, is sloppiness. I mean, if a portfolio comes to me with errors in it, and that like kind of turns me off, because if you're trying to get a job with me and you're trying to put your best foot forward and you've not cared enough to make the presentation absolutely perfect, either you don't know that this is a mistake, or you're sloppy, so overlooked it.
In either case, they don't work.
Yeah, and I mean, because you have every opportunity to take other people's help also to correct your mistakes before, because this is your calling card, so you need to make it absolutely perfect. And for example, very recently I saw this young copywriter's portfolio, and she had created her own website, and it's not that she had like the most. She's not worked for. I think she's worked 2 or 3 years, but everything that she's presented is presented so well. And what she did was she did a project. She did an activation sort of thing where she, I think she stood outside Low and she handed out something which caught the creative director's attention when they came down for their tea break or smoke break or something. And she actually, that's how she got her internship. So she had made this into a video. So I mean, which just shows the initiative. And also she has, in the video, she's presenting her idea, she's talking about it. So I think presentation skills are such a key part of, and when you're presenting an idea, I also get to know whether it's really your idea, because a lot of times
Absolutely.
so whether you've really understood it and you're explaining to me why you've done what you've done and that logic behind the magic, so to speak. So I said, I think that's, if you display all of those things and you display that your quest for perfection, and the fact that because I think relentlessly pursuing it, like doggedness is a very key kind of trait. I think resilience is the most important trait, because you'll be facing rejection every day from your boss, from clients, from the environment. So to be able to spring back, right after rejection and come back with another idea which you're excited about is like a real challenge. So I think it's that resilience, and to doggedly pursue perfection. And if you really aim high, you'll get somewhere. Like even you study the work of the greats, and then you say, okay, I want to make my film like this. You may not reach that level, but you reach somewhere. So I think that is really important. And the third thing is that you need to really be able to look at yourself and your ideas ruthlessly. I think to be able to be objective about your own ideas is one of the toughest things. And I think it helps to have, like, I've always at different times had a colleague who I feel comfortable to share my, when it's at a very nascent stage, because you're very sensitive about it. And that person will, but they will not be nasty about it. They won't rip you apart. But at the same time, they'll tell you very firmly but kindly that this is not working. So I think it's really important to have somebody like that in your life.
So now I'm gonna ask these girls if they have some questions to pop at you. But I have a few questions of my own with respect to when for young copywriters and young creative professionals. One of the things is, for me, this is personally for me, like, there's a very I think it's almost fashionable to quote the writer's block whenever possible for a person who does not crack the idea. Now, have you ever faced something like a writer's block?
Yeah,
if you ever do have a block, forget writers, but a creative block, how do you deal with something like that? I mean, in so many years, I'm sure there will be times when you've probably not been able to crack it. How do you deal with a situation like that?
So, of course, I have the advantage of being a creative head where I have a large team. So, as long as everybody doesn't have a writer's block at the same time, my job is to make sure that the right idea comes out. But having said that, I think the way that if I have to come up with something, write something, the way what I do is that, yeah, sometimes your mind is a blank. So what I do, and this is something that I found helps me, that I just open a Word doc and I just write down whatever comes to my head without worrying about what it is. I just keep on writing, and then I'll go away and some other stupid thought comes, and like, so, I keep on doing this, and then I find that after a while something clicks in, or, even if I go back and read, and sometimes it's not even that I have to go back and read, because it doesn't make any sense sometimes when you go back and read it,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
at other times it does, or at other times you find that when in this process somewhere an idea clicks, and then when you start fleshing it out, some of those other things that you had put down on that page, they find a role in that. Some of it doesn't, and you just remove it. But yeah, so that, I mean, for me, that is a good technique. There are many others. You go away and read something, or you go away and watch something. You just go and watch some fantastic international award-winning advertising. I mean, something that inspires you, basically. Yeah.
It's a sort of a heavy one, but I really wanted to know what you think about this. Do you think that we as advertisers need to consider social responsibility as a prerequisite to the kind of content that we're creating? Like, we cannot afford to be tone deaf anymore about issues that are quite prevalent, because like today's times are so polarizing that any content that you're putting out, a post, a video, an ad, whatever it is, you need to consider the kind of repercussions or the influence that's going to have on.
Yeah, I think you have to first of all consider the repercussions, because somebody might come and vandalize your office or attack you personally, because
Totally.
that's how
Totally.
the times are today. So I'm saying that even if you believe that something is the right message,
Yeah.
personally, based on your own values, you may not be able to put that message out there, because first of all, you're doing it for a brand, and that brand will face the repercussions. As I said, your agency will face the repercussions. There's lots of money riding on it. There are lots of things riding on it. So I think that just purely from that perspective, of course, you have to be careful. And also, as a member of society, obviously, you need to be responsible. Whatever the message you put out there on behalf of a brand has to also be a good citizen in that sense.
True.
So, as a fresher, I wanted to know where do you seek inspiration and where do you source your talent from?
When you say source my talent, mean my own talent, or you're saying where I find people from?
Your
What do you
own.
mean? My own talent. So I think that to be when you're a writer, you're a slightly strange person, because you're one part of it is you really have to be in the moment, but another part of you also has to be outside. You're in a group of friends talking, but there's a part of your brain that needs to be outside, watching what's going on, the interaction, the conversation, because that's when you get the perspectives, and insights which you can put in when you're writing a situation for a film. That's what you can put in, and you can make it come to life and make it real, because it's based on something that you have experienced. And if you were just totally in, while it's very important to be totally in the moment in life, we have to be that, but that's the thing, you have to have a compartment of your brain which is all, it's like this other camera which is watching from a slight distance. Every movie you watch, every book you read, every play you go to see, everything should, the music that you listen to, there should be a part of you sort of over time, initially consciously, but later unconsciously, sort of filing it away to use in some form or the other later on. And and the other thing is that if you're excited about an idea which gets bombed, you should save the ideas, because believe me, if there's one secret that I can share with you, is that many a time something that you presented to a client or for a brand, it didn't, it got bombed, and then you present it to, maybe a year later or 2 years later to somebody else, and then that gets bombed, and then maybe 3-4 years later you present it to someone else, and it gets, and sometimes it could be for the same category. At times it's not even the same category. It's like, there's a famous case of a campaign which was presented to an air conditioner brand, and the client didn't buy the campaign, and it was later converted to a campaign for a refrigerator brand. So I think that, if you really believe in an idea, save it, and in a modified form, it can work brilliantly for another brand. So hold on to your ideas, recycle them. That's I think one tip that I could give you.
Anything else? Any of you? Sumo, this has been a total pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Not
Have
at
a
all.
great evening.
Thank you. Thanks all of you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.